What's up, guys? You're checking out the No Recess podcast. This is episode 4. I'm here as always with my buddies Matt Long and Chris Vernig. Matt, how you doing, man?
Real good. How's it going, Joe?
Man, I'm pretty good. Just caught up in this March Madness stuff, but Butler is still dancing, so we are good. Chris, how are you, man?
It's madness, Joe.
It is. You know all the games that have happened so far, some of them are going to go off right now, but we're recording this at I don't know, 8 something on Thursday evening. Do you realize that all the games except for 3 so far have been one possession games, and the ones that haven't have all been won by the Big East teams, Villanova, Xavier, and Butler. So I'm having a pretty good day, if I may say so myself.
I was thinking of you on Butler there. And speaking of the other end of the spectrum, I heard Texas is like 0 for 5 or something.
Yeah. Butler handed them their loss today.
But I mean the state of Texas.
Yeah, I think Stephen F. Austin lost as well. I don't know who. Oh, I think Baylor lost, and so did Texas Southern. Arizona got him. Oh, that's another one that was more than one possession. So I lied. So there were 4 games, and 3 of the 4 that were won by more than one possession were Big East teams. Sorry, I went off on a bias that's probably not even entirely truthful. Fuck, I should just stick to baseball, right?
Joe, you like those small Catholic schools on the East Coast, don't you? That's what you like.
Yeah, and some of them in the middle of America. I'm really excited for this Butler Notre Dame game that's going to go down on Saturday afternoon.
It's a Indiana Super Bowl right there.
Yeah, it's basically, you could call it that, or you could call it a cultural war. 6-1, half dozen the other. Same difference.
Right.
Some people like white corn, some people like yellow corn. What are you going to do? It's a big deal there.
Exactly.
But anyway, Jesus Christ, I think we should stick to baseball. And I don't know, we're kind of in the dog days of baseball, so Chris, or of the spring anyway. So Chris, you don't mind, I'm going to talk to Matt for a little bit about the Giants, and then we'll bang into the Twins.
You got it.
Yes, sir. But Matt, unfortunately, the Giants still aren't doing well. Angel Pagan has missed 3 days in a row, and it looks like he's going to miss 3 more days, so he's still hurt. I don't even know if that's news anymore. We're not really hitting that well. The team's not really pitching that well. And Pablo Sandoval is still mouthing off, saying that he hates everyone. Do you have anything to say about this? Because I'm not really sure that I do.
I'll say 2 words, and then everything after that will be less effective than that. Odd year. I don't have anything better to say, but it's a cluster F, and
you can say fuck. We're not censored on this.
Oh, we are. This isn't PG-13.
No. I mean, unless like you're, do you have family listening to this? We don't want to disappoint mom.
No, I'm trying to get her to listen, but we need more listeners. No, it's a huge clusterfuck.
My mom doesn't even listen to me when I speak to her, let alone on the radio.
Yeah, but it's yeah. I don't know, Joe. Some good information though today. A bright spot, just to counter what you said, is Vogelsong did go 4.2 innings and had 4 strikeouts, gave up no runs. Belt hit another bomb.
That's 3, right?
That's 3rd, and it was opposite field. He went oppo. He's looking good. And also, I think Joe Panic went deep again, and I think that's his 2nd.
Yeah, I know it's at least 2.
But he's still hitting like below his weight, as a lot of their players are. But at least those are, that's a bright spot.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I didn't want to get all into this before now, but we were talking to our buddy on Twitter, Candlestick Will, about Justin Maxwell, and I kind of poo-pooed the Justin Maxwell thing, not necessarily because I thought he was a good or a bad player, just because I thought we had 6 outfielders, and I felt like if Justin Maxwell became part of the conversation, that meant just by default that we were doing something wrong. And I didn't want to go to that, but here we are on March 19th, I guess, and sure as shit, like, Justin Maxwell might be the bright spot of the outfield.
Yeah, I think I think he has a great chance of making the club, and he did hit 18 home runs a couple years ago, so he has a little pop. He's athletic. Thank God for Gregor Blanco. I'm serious. Right. I mean, that dude can. He never complains. He's got 2 rings, and he ends up playing many innings every year. Usually over 400, over 300 at bats, I believe. You might be able to check me on that, but
I don't feel like it.
I think the point is that he has been a godsend playing center, to play right, play left, and now he's going to start again, and he's going to probably be. I mean, if you throw out Maxwell, Blanco, and Aoki, I mean, I might take Blanco as the best of the 3 right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really counter that. I just, I take some I don't know, just comfort, for lack of a better term, that we're still plus or minus 3 weeks from opening day, and I just hope to God that we figure it out. Moving on from how the team is playing and just kind of some shit that's going on around the team. Were you able to catch up on any of Pablo Sandoval's comments over the last week or two? Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, as you know, Joe, and maybe the listeners have caught on a little bit, I don't know, but I'm a huge Pablo fan, as most Giants fans were, I guess is the correct term now, but he's even starting to really grate on me. I have a really long leash for Pablo, but I think the thing that got me the most is him adding the 2 players' names to the comments. I could have actually gotten basically, how he said Bochy and Pence were actually a manager and a player. Those are the only 2 guys he mentioned in saying that he was going to miss. And if he had left off Pence and just said Bochy, I would have been okay with it probably. Because, you could go, well, he loved the manager, and he's just moving on. But when you add Pence, when you add 1 player, it's like an Oscar speech when you start to thank everybody. And then once you do that, you've put yourself in the position that you better get everybody then. And he should have just never gone there, because that's bullshit. That's not true, I don't think, either. But he's so stubborn, and he's so getting gassed up with bad info or whatever, or hanging out with Hanley, or I don't know what it is that he's not the type that's going to back down. And Pablo is an emotional dude, and he's oversensitive. He can rake, but he is doing what he does, and I don't think he's going to back down on it. I mean, at some point he's going to really regret it, though, I think. Yeah. That's my 2 cents. So I'm bummed. I don't like it.
Me too. That's basically what I think as well. Just simply because I don't have an issue with Pablo. I never did. The guy helped my favorite team win 3 World Series. The guy should never have to pay for a meal in San Francisco in his entire life, as far as I'm concerned. And the shitty thing of this that really just kind of grinds on me is how should I say this? If Pablo's having this much trouble dealing with the closure of his tenure in San Francisco, where it seems like all the harsh words are one-sided, can you imagine what the Boston media is going to do to him when he hits $180 for 6 weeks?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just, I've always been kind of skeptical of that guy's brother and the agent that he had, because he doesn't have a major agent. He's not repped by a guy, so he's not going to be properly controlled. And I don't want to say that the Giants coddled him, but I do feel like they protected him from some things. If you notice, when he was hitting $180, he never really had to come out and give quotes to the media or talk about it or what have you. They just kind of let it go. And I just think the absolute opposite of that is going to happen in Boston. And if I'm held with a gun to my head, I just think that that's absolutely going to hurt his career and hurt his production, because just like you said, he is really sensitive. Chris, go ahead, Matt.
One last thing. I agree. The thing though that I think could happen, Joe, at least for this first year, because I also see Pablo as a little bit of a front runner, is I think he's actually going to probably rake. And I think the Giants are going to not have a great year. And I think those 2 things together he's gonna sit on the top where he is right now and be okay, and he's gonna win. He's gonna lose the war maybe, but my prediction is that he wins the battle for this year. And but what you're saying, and then I'll get off on this, is true. I think in the long term, I think you're right on it. And you've always been on who's around him. You've always told me that, and I never used to really focus in on that. But it seems like the chickens have come home to roost on that situation with the advice he's getting. And I'm out on Pablo now.
Yeah, you could be right. Chris, do you have anything you want to add to this before we talk about your beloved Twinkies?
Well, just really quick, and Matt and you and I have talked about it too. It is his handlers, I believe, because the whole thing was unusual right from the start. Okay, Sabian gave him a low offer last spring, yes, but every other player who has a normal agent, a normal agency representing them, understands that every negotiation has the similar, formula to it. Teams will start out with a low offer. Players will ask for way more than they know they're going to get. One side goes up, the other side comes down. Eventually you meet somewhere in the middle and a deal gets done. And, unfortunately for the Giants front office, that's just not how things worked out with Pablo and whoever it is that's repping him, and that's the unfortunate thing, just how unusual it was, because I think Sabian probably brought to the table the same formula that he brings to the table with every other player, all the hundreds of other contracts that he's negotiated in his career, but in this one case, it just wasn't how it was going to be with Panda and his people.
And it's going to hurt his legacy too, which sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just really interesting. Like, to put a bow on this, just as you said, I really do believe that Sabian went with the same methodology or process that he goes about all of his other negotiations. And, like, Pablo has always kind of said that he'd never felt special or anything. And I just guarantee you that that's absolutely right. Like, Brian Sabian didn't handle this with any kind of like speciality or what have you. And I can tell you another thing. You can goddamn bet your ass that the New England media isn't going to handle him with any kind of kid gloves either. So it's going to be really interesting to, to see how that plays out. But I'm just kind of done talking about it. Chris, like, some of your Twins prospects, as expected, broke from the majors and went to minor league camp this week. I do hear that Brian Dozier's having a good spring in Florida. How are the Twins doing, man?
Dozier's having a good spring as usual. He's just, at this point, I think he's kind of earned his way out of that prospect role. I think he's pretty much a bona fide, big league vet at this point. And probably the biggest question mark is center field. Aaron Hicks was a 5-tool kid who was, one of their top prospects for years. This is the third spring training that he's been a part of. Great center fielder. He can get on Sports Center any night with his glove, but it's the bat. He's kind of swinging a fungo out there thus far in his career. He always, Torrey Hunter's been working with him, but it's looking like they're another one of their prospects, second baseman Eddie Rosario, is in line possibly to win the center field job. Obviously, Dozier's at second, so they have a spare there. Last year, they had Danny Santana, a shortstop by trade, play center field most of the year. And the Twins have Nick Gordon in the system, D. Gordon's brother, as a shortstop. So they've got a lot of these bases covered. It's just a couple of open spots, and center field being one of them. So we'll see if Rosario, the second baseman, ends up winning that job. And then pitching-wise, it looks like Alex Meyer will make the team. It's looking that way. They're talking about possibly using him to start his career as a long reliever. Eventually, he's going to be a top-of-the-rotation type of guy, but he's never pitched in the bigs. So they may kind of coddle him a little bit, have him pitch in the bullpen to start, just because Tommy Malone is having a pretty good spring as well, and he may be able to be a better choice to start the year in the number 5 spot. So other than that, everything's going well. I mean, they're winning more than they're losing at this point, but I guess once April comes around and they head up to Detroit, we'll see what happens.
Hey, just one stat, if I could get in about Dozier, because he is kind of my guy. only 5 guys last year were 2020 guys. And the reason why I focus on 2020 is not just because it's 20 steals, but that is an indicator of the type of player. The other guys, tell me if you think these guys are good. Michael Brantley, Ian Desmond, Carlos Gomez, and Todd Frazier.
Yep.
So I look at the 2020 as an indicator of what you are versus that being the result. If you have 19 or 21 steals, it's not that big of a difference. But if you're going 2020, you are showing the highest levels of power and speed, and Dozier has been able to do that.
Hey, just a side note here, Chris, because I think you'll probably have a take on this, and this is completely off the books and completely off of everything we're talking about. Do you think Todd Frazier has a repeat pseudo All-Star year this year for the Reds, or do you think that was just some bullshit?
You know what? It's hard to say. It was funny because I was actually in Louisville during the home run derby, which was in Minneapolis. And so the guy that we were staying with, he's a huge Cincinnati Reds fan because Louisville's only about an hour and a half away from Cincinnati. And we were actually talking about that. And it's hard to say. I mean, I don't probably not. I would say if I were a betting man and you were to put a gun to my head, and Joe, I know you are a betting man. I would probably hedge on that and go with no. It wouldn't surprise me either way. But I mean, he's a very good player. I don't expect him to fall off a cliff or anything like that. But he's more of a pretty solid player than a great player. But that's just my take.
He's probably the outlier in those 5 that I said. I would say, if that's where you're kind of going, Joe, Frazier's the outlier of the other 4 guys.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Just stop telling people about my gambling habits, will you? You don't know who's listening to this. Shit. But speaking of gambles, there's been a lot of teams this year that have made some crazy deals. Both big in nature and then a lot of little deals as well. And I know that we're a Giants and Twins-centric podcast, but I just felt that, I wanted to get your guys' opinions on a couple things, and we can kind of run through this one by one, or you can pick and choose. But the deals that I wanted to discuss in general were the Nationals picking up Max Scherzer, the complete revamp that the San Diego Padres did, and the A's pulling off 9 trades. 9 trades in one offseason with 5 of 6 All-Stars. Now, I'm sorry, 4 of 6 All-Stars. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I do want to lay out one point before I let you guys have the floor. Everybody talks about the genius that is Moneyball and how Billy Beane just consistently competes with no money and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And I've got a lot of good A's friends of mine, and they just say, like, how their fans are so tough, and like Giants fans and everybody else are soft, and we don't know what it takes to be a real fan, and this, that, and the other. And I just think to myself, like, sure, I understand Billy Beane is hamstringed based on financial obligations or commitments or however you want to put that. And so he's got to play with a different deck than everybody else. And I'll give you that. Now, if you just continuously, over the last year, do the same thing over and over and over again and fall short in the exact same way, at what point is that, like, no longer genius? And are you, like, actually, by the definition, insane for doing the same thing repeatedly, expecting a different result? And as a fan, when do you go from tough to, like, being insane or crazy? Like, if as a human being, if I put my hand on a hot stove and don't pull it off and keep doing it, I'm an idiot. There's nothing tough about that. Like, you might hurt yourself, and that's wonderful, but that's not tough. That's stupid. And I guess, Matt, I don't know, like, first give me your thoughts on the A's, and then we can kind of push forward to the other deals from there.
Okay, well, I'll be quick because I disagree with you a little bit here, but I hear what you're saying. I would say with Beane, if it is true that money really is the thing that's pushing him, and and that really is the thing that's making him make these deals. Then I would say the reason that he's, if you want to say putting his hand on the stove, is because that's the only way he can do it. And if you compare the A's to similar teams and teams that have larger budgets, a lot of them would kill their firstborn to have the success that the A's have had. So, I mean, if we're talking, we could list those teams off, but they're out there, and there's quite a few of them that you know what I mean. The other part would be, if though, and it seems like more people are starting to say this, and maybe this is where you're going. I've heard this more from the fan base and just in media in general. If maybe the money constraints aren't as harsh as maybe Beane or the A's put out, although I don't think there isn't any money constraints, but if it is a deal where they actually could hold some of these players a little longer, even with their owners not putting out money, and he's still putting his hand on the stove and just moving around to move around, then of course I don't think that makes sense. I guess I'm still in the camp that I think the reason that happens is because, like Donaldson, why the hell would you trade Donaldson? And Cespedes, but what they'll say is that they weren't going to be able to afford them when money came up. So that's the reasoning. But I wouldn't trade either of those guys ever. And I think I blame it on the ownership, and they should have made an exception for both of those guys, or at least one, and said, you're right, usually we don't pay our guys, just like we let Giambi go, just like we let Tejada go back in the days. I know that was different ownership, but why not make an exception and say, yeah, we're going to be crazy Moneyball and touch the stove and do that, but we're going to have one or two anchors that might hurt us financially, but we're going to keep like Donaldson and Cespedes and then build around that? Like, why didn't they do that? I just can't see Billy Beane saying, oh, you know what? We need to get rid of Cespedes, and then right after that, let's get rid of Donaldson. Anyways, that's my take on the A's.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just overall getting kind of, fired up and bent out of shape about it, Like, I just don't understand what's special about it. Like, okay, like, you get to almost the peak of the mountain, but you never hit it, and you do it over and over and over again for a decade, and, like, you can't figure out how to, like, get whatever financial bump you may need, like, or, figure out some means to do it. Like, I don't believe that. There's more billionaires and people looking to invest in the Bay Area than there is probably anywhere in the world, with the exception of probably, like, India or something. You know what I mean? And it just seems like a cop-out that people use to, like, fall short of their best. Chris, do you have anything on the A's, or would you rather talk about the Max Scherzer deal?
Well, we could do that. I just one thing quickly about the A's, that if you read Moneyball, Billy Beane even says, there's a direct quote in the book Moneyball, not the movie, that quote, "My shit doesn't work in the playoffs." So I think what that kind of tells you is that Billy Beane's whole philosophy, I think it does come down to cheapskate ownership. And what's the name of it? Is it Lou Wolf or something?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is an absolute cheapskate. He's a cheap bastard. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you read the book Moneyball by Michael Lewis, I mean, he gives you some indication about the teeth that Beane had to pull just to get, some has-been players at the trade deadline or whatever. So I think for Billy Beane, it's mostly just trying to build a team, I think, for the regular season on the budget that he's given. And who knows whether or not he could have gone to the owner and said, can we make an exception for Cespedes or for Donaldson? It's possible. But I think that team is run on the cheap. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, they don't draw a ton of fans. They're not like the Yankees or the Giants across the bay there. I mean, it's a pretty tightly run ship that's not awash in cash. So I think he's mainly looking to put together a successful team, and then just hoping that they can get hot at the right time and make a run in the playoffs, like the Giants did in 2010, or the Marlins did in 2003, or something like that. But I think for the most part, I think Beane operates on the regular season. At least that's how I've always seen it.
Yeah, totally. Now, Chris, like, one thing, getting to some of the other trades and moving on, you're a Twins fan, obviously, and your rivals, the Detroit Tigers, have kind of put their team together through free agency and trades and like big spending, and you saw Max Scherzer go from the Tigers to the Nationals in a record deal, and like not so local to you, but the Padres have basically reinvented their team through free agency and some strategic trades. And I just wonder what you think about the nature of these deals and how people are spending money in baseball and where the resources are going, and where you see the game kind of changing over the next few years now that, we've transferred from Bud Selig, whose job was to, rebuild baseball after the '94 shit and the steroid era, and now we're in an era with Rob Manfred that the game is in both economically and the game itself are in a state of flux. And I just wanted to get your input on the impact of like the trades and the deals that have gone on so far.
Well, I think it's crazy, especially I think we may have even touched on it in maybe the first podcast, episode 1, about the Tigers. I mean, just the amount of deferred money that they are going to be paying guys like Verlander and Miguel Cabrera. I mean, they're going to be paying these guys $22-23 million a year when these guys are 39 years old. I mean, that's going to be just crazy. I think the Tigers, I just can't say it enough. I think they're going to be an unparalleled disaster economically. I think it's going to make the Yankees A-Rod situation look like a pretty good deal by comparison. But I think the term, I think, is what's crazy, is that you get some of these guys that are already 31, 32 years old that are getting these 10-year contracts. What I would expect, the market correction you would think you would see over the next few years would be more money, shorter deals, and more per year. You know what I mean? Instead of a 10-year, $200 million deal, you might see a 4 or 5 year deal where a guy might get 25, or who knows, could a guy even get $30 million in a year? I think that's something that's going to happen, just because I think the idea of paying players $22-23 million when they're going to be 40 years old, and Justin Verlander, will he even be in the game when he's 40 years old? I mean, clearly the last couple of years he's been his numbers have been eroding, definitely. Now they keep saying how he's in the best shape of his life and all that crap, but that's would be my expectation, is that the correction would be shorter term, more money per year.
Yeah, and actually, Matt, if you think back to some of the stuff that we talked about when we were trying to go back to the Pablo Sandoval deal in the last offseason and figure out how we were going to make that work, one of the suggestions that I had was to actually do that, was to pay him more money for less years, and ultimately they didn't go that route. But I would be interested to see, if something like that would take a little weight, going forward once some of these contracts do fizzle out. You look at guys like Cliff Lee and Ryan Howard, who are basically on their way out of the game and still, have tons of money on their contract. Matt, what do you think about the state of the games and the contracts and just how these deals are getting put together, and also like the I don't know, like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, what am I trying to say, like airtime necessarily to see if these trades or free agent deals work out in like the long term. Everybody wants to know and judge the success of a deal right away. Like what do you think about where we are in terms of some of this?
I like how Timmy makes deals. You know how he does, like, 2 years, $40 million, 2 years, $36 million.
No, exactly. That's what Chris said. Like, short and for a lot of money. Like, and I think that's absolutely the way to do it.
But that's what's weird is, and I think all three of us are fairly intelligent, it seems like it's going the other way, at least with these bigger deals. Like with Stanton, what do you get? He's a $300 million man? Is that right?
Yeah.
324, something like that. Actually, I heard on the radio today, and I know it was Maxim Marcellus, and he was going a little high just for the hell of it. But his point was well taken. They were talking about Mike Trout, and if he was on the market right now, and if LA and New York got involved, that we might be looking at, like, he even said $500 million, which I know is too far off. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes close to $400 million. But I mean, what I'm saying is, it's that same thing you're talking about. It's like, for how many? Why it would be a shitload of years, and it's like, I don't like those deals. But I mean, I can't really add much more than you two guys have, except I'd throw back at both of you, who I think are a little better on this economic issue of the game. Is why? Why is it because of is it going that way because then you have an anchor and you supposedly have a face of the franchise, and then they think from there you can advertise and build around that, and that it's worth doing it that way? Because I mean, these guys are doing it for money, right?
Yeah,
I mean, at least the perceived way to make money. So I'm wondering, what is that MO that makes them do that?
Well, I think you look at the Tigers, I think, you get the PR bounce out of it right away. But then again, they just let Scherzer go. So, I mean, they kind of lost a little bit on that. But you get the PR hit by making a big splash. It gets the fan base fired up. But I think it also, you look at a team like Detroit, I think Detroit understands, or at least I hope they do, that probably 5 years from now, their championship win, they're going to be rebuilding in 5 years. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I would be shocked if the Tigers are a good team in 4 or 5 years. So you could almost argue that they're paying all that money for this year, for next year, and maybe the year after, to see if they can get that ring. And,
right.
And Matt, you and I have talked about it with the Giants. It's like, if you can win one ring, and regardless of how much money you spend, if you can get that one ring, does that mean the whole thing was worth it? It probably is, right?
Yeah, actually, you're right. That's got it. And just to follow this up, it's that, and the reason that they spend so much is because these guys aren't going to take the Timmy deal, and they want the ring so bad that they're willing to pay the big that's got to be it, right, Joe? Or you usually have ways of looking different angles into it, but isn't that have to be their main reason for doing it? The clubs doing these big contracts?
I mean, I think it's partially that too. I think with Detroit, like, what's the guy's name? Mike Yelich? Yelich? Is that his name?
Ilitch, yeah.
Illich. I mean, I don't want to say this too, like, uncouth, but I think that guy's about to die, and I think he wants to win a World Series, and, like, he might as well spin it like he's got money to blow. You know what I mean? I don't know about this necessarily in baseball all the way, because I just haven't done the research. But you look at guys in basketball like Paul Allen and the guy that owns the Clippers now, Steve Ballmer, and like Joe Lacob, like those guys are moguled up like hundreds of billions of dollars, like a lot of fucking money. So whatever they spend in this is just kind of like their fun money. And baseball is kind of like a way to do that because there is no real restrictions to it. And you look at organizations where guys are still working, like, you know what I mean? And it's just not really like that. Like, Lou Wolf, like, works. You know what I mean? Donald Sterling, like, say what you want about the guy, but his money was working. You know what I mean? It's not like his shit's, like, gone. Like, he was working. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, I wonder if it's a reflection of what's going on in the general culture or in the United States economically, where, if you look at the 1% or the idea of the CEO, and even in this bounce back from the recession, the people who have really benefited are the top. And I know I can't draw a straight line from that to, this is what's happening in baseball, but just it does fit into that storyline of the top being able to just spend massive amounts, massive wealth in short-term thinking with these long-term deals. Yep. It feels like there has to be some type of cultural connection there.
Sure, and like the other thing too, like I think this goes back in, and we can kind of like segue this into another part of this conversation as well. Is I think Bud Selig deserves a lot of credit here. Like in the '90s when he took over like pre-strike and then getting out of the steroid era, there were a lot of teams that were about to move. Like the Giants were about to move. A lot of teams were like really really struggling. And
Twins too.
Yeah, were they good? They were going to
ahead.
move too, huh?
Yep.
And sure, like you've got small and big markets, and there's still a gap, and I think there always will be, kind of because of what we just said. Like there's a gap between like the rich and the poor, and at no matter what level, like there's still going to be a gap there. And I don't know. I think that once some of these, like the first rounds of big deals, go a certain direction, I think you're gonna see a morph both in deal structure, like Chris was saying, but also in the game. And one of the ways that I think that we'll see a deal structure in this game is a lot of these bigger deals are happening from pitchers. You know what I mean? And
Right.
There was a stat, and I'm paraphrasing this, so Matt, don't hold me to the cross or look it up. But there's something on the order of it's 50% likelihood that a pitcher, no matter how good or bad he is, ends up on the DL through the course of a 162 game season, and like it's 2/3 more likely for a pitcher to miss an entire season or more with an injury than it is a hitter. So just doing some simple like risk analysis, it would make sense to not spend as much money on a pitcher. And I just wonder if you're gonna see things like, more like long relievers or guys that can come in and throw like 3 solid innings and get you out and bridge the gap, so you're not stressing out a guy that you're throwing, like 200 and some odd innings or whatever it might be. And I just wonder if the game is going to morph in that way. And like really, when you look at some of the things that baseball's doing with like instant replay and their pace of play rules and like whatever else, the initiative to innovate is way higher in the game of baseball than it's been since I've been alive. And because there is so much money and an influx in that kind of thing, I think it's only natural that the game will be evolving and, taking some of the financial and, on-field burden off the pitchers, I think is just a natural way for that to happen.
Well, and I think, we already see the 100 pitch count, limit, which drives Bert Blyleven crazy. He's the color guy for the Twins. It absolutely drives him nuts just because he was the kind of guy that, the number of complete games that he pitched was ridiculous. But I think you're right, Joe, and I think it's going to go beyond just this 100 pitch thing. And ultimately, because what's going to happen, the reason why you have all these Tommy John surgeries is because you get these kids now that play baseball year-round. So by the time they pitch in high school, by the time they even get to college or even the minor leagues, they've already thrown so many more innings than a 19 or a 20-year-old would have thrown 30 or 40 years ago, that by the time they get to be 22, 23, 24 years old, well, their tendons are already fraying because they've been playing baseball for year-round since they were 15 years old, you know what I mean? Whereas in the old days, you would hear guys talk about how they would play basketball in the winter, they would run track in the fall or whatever, maybe even play football in the fall. They would have a break from baseball. They weren't playing it all the time. But athletes now, everything is so specified, regardless of what sport it is that you're going for. If you think that you're good enough to make a living or make millions of dollars, you're into that like gangbusters, you're balls to the wall year round doing it. So that's part of it too, but that's not going to change. So the only other give is going to be what you're saying. It's going to be, I guess, reducing the workload. It's going to be bolstering bullpens. Maybe they even expand the roster by a spot or two, so teams can carry extra pitchers moving forward. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, totally. I wouldn't see a reason to argue against it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing too that is pretty interesting and innovative as far as baseball's going right now, which was pretty much poo-pooed by just about everybody in the game, basically, was the idea that Pete Rose would get his ban lifted for the Hall of Fame. And it looks like that is at least being discussed. Matt, do you have any thoughts on this?
It's interesting. I think Pete Rose should be in the Hall. I mean, I'm not a huge Pete Rose fan, but I want Barry Bonds in the Hall, and I wouldn't mind Clemens in there too, and maybe possibly if Rose got in, that would help that. I know that's kind of a side note, but yeah, I'll let you guys kind of get into that more, but let me throw out one stat here. And I know we all like Ichiro, but listen to this to put the perspective of how great Pete Rose was, all right? Ichiro averaged 224 hits per season from 27 to 36. Okay? That's pretty amazing,
Wow,
right?
Yeah.
Had he averaged that in the MLB from ages 21 to 26, he still would be 68 hits shy of Pete Rose.
That's crazy.
So
No, that is amazing.
Because I always thought that, man, he really was a guy who was possibly better than Rose in a weird way, at least as a hitter. Because, if you look at his stats in the game, they're incredibly dominating the first decade he was in. But I just kind of had to sit down, since you mentioned Pete Rose, Joe, and just, I guess, worship at the altar of Pete Rose there for a sec.
And one thing I want to just hop in if I could, man, I think you touched on something I was actually going to bring up. I don't think it is a side note talking about linking Pete Rose to the steroid guys. And I think it's going to be interesting with this new commissioner, Rob Manfred. Could that possibly be something that we see? Could a forgiveness, if you will, a pardon of Pete Rose, could that be a precedent for maybe a few years down the road for a similar type of pardon for the steroid guys? I do think there's a link there, and I think it'll be interesting to follow that going forward.
Yeah, I actually 100% agree. And I mean, look, I feel like as it sits in the moment, sometimes the best baseball players get inducted into the Hall of Fame. They sure do. And I don't want to take any credit from the guys that are there. But there's also, it's become clearly evident over the past, 5 years or so, that it's also become kind of more of a popularity contest with the writers and the rest of the press than it is necessarily how good you are at baseball in any way. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, because I don't have the same moral compass as the people that vote for the Hall of Fame. I just know that Pete Rose and Barry Bonds and many other guys as alike are some of the very best guys to ever play the game of baseball, and they deserve to be enshrined with the other guys that were also the best at playing baseball. And I'm glad that we're entering an era of baseball with more of an eye toward innovation, and I hope that eye toward innovation doesn't turn a blind eye to the complete history of the game.
Well, yeah, you have your, sorry, Chris, real quick, you have your hits leader and your home run leader of your league on the sidelines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
No, I was just going to say amen to that. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of innovation, and again, we're getting kind of way off of what we usually talk about here today, because it's fucking March Madness, and that's just kind of what we're doing right now. But I also, in a sport that needs to innovate, some shit happened over the last week in football with the Borland guy from the Niners going to retire. And I just had to talk to you guys as buddies and fellow sports fans and get your thoughts on that. Me personally, I don't think it's ever okay for a stranger to really tell anybody that it is or isn't okay to retire. And I mean, if a guy wants to stop doing his job for whatever reason, especially if he doesn't feel safe, you just kind of got to let that go. You know what I mean? And I hope that baseball just kind of or football rather, just kind of like takes note of that and makes the necessary changes of their games so that their players can have the fullest careers possible. And before we go, Matt, what do you think of Borland and his retirement?
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Joe, and I can't really add anything to that except for this a backlash, which I was listening on the radio. Colin Cowherd, he was tackling this issue, and he was making it a situation where he said it's just the elites and the people driving BMWs and drinking lattes who are looking down on football and saying that, the game needs to be changed and that, football, he was saying football is for the common man. It's blue collar and, like farmers, they can get injured and coal mining is dangerous. And hey, people do that and they can get injured. So these elites just need to, be quiet and don't take this game away from us and that kind of stuff. And it kind of really pissed me off. So I would just say that there's a war going on there, or starting, I think, where a large number of real strong NFL fans are kind of like, digging their feet in, I think, and I think this will play out more where like what we're saying right now, they want to make that sound fringe or not tough or I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it, but I just wanted to say that and then step off.
Well, we know, yeah, and I think, and I couldn't agree. Colin's attitude is something that I also noticed from all these football guys, Mike Florio and Peter King and all these football wonks. They tried to poo-poo it. It's no big deal. This is one guy's decision. It's not going to affect the long term. But to what you're saying, Matt, with Colin about it's the elites, the people who drive BMWs, that's not true at all. I mean, Pop Warner enrollment is down into the double digits over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, these are parents driving minivans that are not letting their kids play football. These are not, Patrick Bateman in fucking, Manhattan. That's poo-pooing the NFL. These are parents. These are middle-class parents. And I think Malcolm Gladwell, the pop sociologist, he coined the phrase, he thinks football is going to be ghettoized in the future. I don't like that term. That's a little more pejorative than I like. My other people I don't know, we've kind of think it'll become a gladiator sport. That's what we've kind of said. But the long range implication is that kids who have options for sports, which, I mean, again, and this is going to fall along socioeconomic lines, I believe. I mean, you're going to see white kids in the suburbs that live in fairly big houses on 1.5 acres of land. They're going to have more options to play soccer, to play baseball, to play golf, whatever. And I think you're going to see more inner city kids playing football, and that's, I think, over the next 20 years, I think that's going to happen. And that's where Gladwell's his ghettoization term came in, because I think it will break along socioeconomic lines. And it is a real huge problem for the NFL. They can say it's not. They can point to TV ratings, but Rome didn't fall in a day. This is going to be something that's going to gradually occur over the next, 10 years, 15 years.
No, totally. And to your point, like, even if it is ghettoized, like, I didn't grow up in the best area. And, like, I don't want to attach myself to that term, but, like, let me put it like this. Football contracts aren't guaranteed. And when young people start seeing, 10 or 15 years of, 8 and 9 figure guaranteed deals for baseball players and other sports too, there's going to be a huge influx of money coming into the NBA with their new TV deals and CBAs in the next 2-3 years. It's absolutely it's gonna hurt football for if nothing else those reasons.
Yep.
And like they make it sound like one guy and the Borland guy and whatnot. because it was more of a public situation. But Jake Locker also retired, and I don't think he was above 27 years old.
Well, how about Sidney Rice too? 27
Yeah.
years old, former Viking, former Seahawk,
Right. Oh,
just retired, and he claimed that he had 15 to 20 concussions in his career. That's
Yeah.
crazy,
And
crazy.
Patrick Willis too, right? Like
Yep.
his first 7 years he made the Pro Bowl, and he's 30.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I don't know. I think the NFL just needs to get their shit together and quit being in denial. Like, it's okay to admit that shit needs to be fixed. Like, I mean, let's be honest, there was a lot of shit that needed to be fixed in baseball. And they went on, like, literally, quite frankly, a 20-year fix to get it to where it is now from 94.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And, like, it wasn't one of those things where, like, no, we're all good, like, we'll fix it. It was, no, we're fucked, and we need to iron this out, and that's what we're going to do. And they brought in a guy in Bud Selig whose job for 20 years was, like, literally, okay, we need to get it back to this. And then once it was back to X, like, he got out.
Yep.
You know, and I don't know what the NFL is doing, but I don't like it. And if you sat and listened to this whole 51-minute jaunt of Chris and Matt and I talking shit on the Fourth No Recess podcast, come shake my hand personally. I owe you a Jameson. Right?
I'll double it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, right? No shit. I think that's all we got. It's March Madness. I've been up since like 7 in the morning. I know you guys would probably want to. I think it's time to get out of here. If anybody wants to check out our stuff, it's at superiorfandom.com. We're at Twitter /superiorfandom, Facebook Superior Fandom, all that jazz. I will see you guys next week. Peace out.